You see, Paul, it is education, I feel, in the deeper sense, because Plato said, information is not understanding. You see, so there's education in the universities and in the colleges, but people coming from universities and colleges can often end up very prejudiced, partly due to prejudiced notions about themselves. I been to 2 universities, you see. So what I realized was, knowledge is not intelligence. And there is a tremendous fragmentation taking place in the world, whereby the people with the most degrees after their names are getting the big jobs, and the people without education are not. But the people without education often can be in a situation of intelligence, like could be common sense, could be whatever. So if we can, Paul, bring in to education the exploration of the difference between knowledge and intelligence, then it can allow people to discover that just because they have knowledge doesn't mean they're intelligent. You know, I'll just tell you a quick story on it. No, I won't tell you, it might be too long a story. But the point is, I have seen, and then the person traps themselves, because if you think knowledge is intelligence, then you're programmed already to believe you're intelligent. And if something is pointed out towards you, which is indicating that in that particular area or whatever, you're not being intelligent, you'll shut down, because you're already invested in the notion you're intelligent, and your so-called whatever is ego, whatever, is invested in that, and it can't look, you see. Well, I will tell you the story. You see, in the Ming Dynasty in China, which I think was about 400 years ago, there was this extremely wise man called Nanin, and he lived up in the top of some mountain, you see. And then there was the university in the bottom of the mountain in this big city. And there was a professor in the university who had become tremendously learned through knowledge, etc. But he had the feeling something was missing. And somebody told him, well, look, there's this wise man up in the mountains called Nanin. So this professor goes off searching to see can he find Nanin up the mountains, you see. And when he eventually, after trekking through the mountains, he comes across this cabin, little cabin. And inside in the cabin is Nanin, and he knocks on the door. Nanin opens the door, and Nanin invites him in. And then he invites him to the table, and the professor sits here, and Nanin sits across from the table. And of course, in China, having tea is... So what happens is, the professor's cup is there and Nanin's cup is there. So Nanin takes the teapot and he pours into the professor's cup so he can have a cup of tea, except he continues pouring. And the tea goes over the cup, falls down on the table, falls down on the professor's pants, and he's furious. He says, what's this all about? He said, you are like the full cup. You are full of knowledge, so what's coming after the knowledge, there's no room for it to enter, and it's pouring down the sides of the cup. You must empty the cup, you see. So in some sense then, it's education of a different sort. Not that the education right now is wrong or anything, but somehow the whole approach to education somehow must start bringing in this aspect of meaning, Paul, that, you know, like the other documents you're working on, because that's meaning. That's a different thing than just knowledge. And knowledge is important as long as people don't confuse it with intelligence, because they are two different things. And once they're not confused, they can support one another. But once they're confused, they actually one blocks the other.
So can I just, as a B part of that, say, what is the end game then for society? How ultimately will that improve the situation?
You see, First of all, I think the end game for society, if there isn't somehow more of a direction in that direction, because maybe something catastrophic, but the thing is that the end game for society, I feel, would be survival. You see, the word creation comes from the word nest. So it's like, if the nest is preserved, then all the aspects of what is nature can operate through that nest. But if the nest is destroyed, or if our home environment is destroyed, then then it's a different outcome. And there is great things happening in the world. I mean, people, it's like we're no longer caught in Pliny the Elder, because the scientific revolution came along and people said, let's question that. And of course it was discovered it was not true, you see. So what happens, Paul, I feel, with the end game? The end game is respect. Respect, you see, the more respect we can have for one another that develops naturally, the more there's a respect for difference. And if you look at nature, it's full of diversity, but it's because of its diversity that it's creating these wonderful things that nature creates. So obviously, if there's a greater respect for difference and diversity, then other natural wonderful things will emerge. And one of those may be an increase in respect. But what does the word respect means? It means looking. Spect comes from the word spectacle, glasses. Means looking. It means looking anew. It means that meeting somebody in a conversation or whatever, somehow or another looking anew, not looking at them through the eyes of what's gone before. Because, like, for example, in this, when I was doing some research in the psychiatric setting, you see, a patient had been brought to a doctor, you see, and the doctor totally misread the patient, you see, wrote his notes, and then the patient ended up in the hospital, and then the patient then meets the psychiatrist in the hospital, you see. But the psychiatrist in the hospital wasn't looking at the patient. He was looking at the notes that the doctor had written, so he wasn't looking anew at the person in front of him. He was already conditioned, well, the doctor must be right, looked at these notes, so he didn't see the person at all. He saw the notes, but he wasn't aware of that. So respect comes then often to, it's not that, you see, we can enormously help one another, in that we can help one another to see what we're not seeing, but in a respectful way. And sometimes it means, you know, I find being a man, women in my life, I find are enormously supportive, because the women in my life tend to not hesitate to tell me if I have my head up my ass, you see. So I don't have to make any effort when if I'm going astray then, you see. So I was talking to Morag the other day, you see, because Morag and myself we're on the same management team. And Morag is in full flow telling me something. I said, Morag, can I ask a question? No. You see, but at that moment I realized, oh, so now, and then the flow continued, and then I discovered something that the question would have gotten in the way of, you see. So basically, and then in other ways, women may need men, you see. But there's a tremendous fragmentation between men and women in the world. And it's powerfully unconscious, you see, in a lot of cases. So anyway, is there any other questions, or anybody would like to say something or ask something?
Well, I have a question which you probably won't answer, well, you can't answer, so it's not a question as such to you. What I'm wondering is this thing about bringing this into the education system. Why should this be necessary? Why isn't this there? There's societies who have that as different rearing children into adults being different from educating them in an institutionalized setting. They're two very different things.
Absolutely.
Because with the institutionalized education system here, there's more and more people, thousands of people going to university to learn to scratch themselves because they don't know how anymore. Tie their shoelaces, can't do that anymore. But degrees and writing and talking about things of no practical significance whatsoever, just to be part of the, I don't know what it is, the service industry, and I don't understand it, and very crucial things just fall down through the slats. But I wonder, can this happen in the education system? I don't think so. The way it is now, it can't.
Yeah, the educational system is powerfully invested, I think. But there again, you see, people said this new form of dialogue couldn't possibly find itself in a way into a prison. I mean, that would be, it's actually after happening. So there may be, and there may be even things that in the world, I think there are some quite interesting experiments in the realm of education and all the rest. But you see, there is this element you're saying, Peter, as well, because, for example, in 2008, when the whole world economy nearly collapsed, so they said it was a credit crisis. So people with huge amounts of knowledge were saying it couldn't happen. That's what, in a sense, led to it. You see, the total belief, no, this couldn't happen. There was only the odd voice saying there's real danger coming. So the credit crisis, and this comes to, again, I think, from what you're alluding towards, that the emphasis is so much on knowledge that practical common sense was then not able to respond or even see the danger. So credit crises, what does credit mean? It comes from the word credo, which is to believe. So they got in a belief system. And then, of course, and now what's happening is it's creeping in again. There's the belief that, well, we escaped that, and now we've learned from it and we're moving on, which is a great danger, you see. So, yes, it's something that slowly but surely, I think there are even educational initiatives going on in the world. There are certain types of schools already, and I think there are lots of certain amount of experiments. But in general, I mean, I sent information from this coming from Catherine. She wrote, you didn't realise your name was on the Catherine, from the Thinking Centre. It went to the schools in Clonmel. Would any of your transitionary year school children or leaving cert or whatever be interested in this talk, because it's a free talk? So I wrote that to the schools, but there was no response, you see. So, but then that doesn't mean I may not have gone about it the right way to get a response. There may be different ways of going about things. And in a sense, that's where collective intelligence comes in, because then you suddenly see, oh, it's the way I've been going about it is not working. There's a different way to go about it. So that frees up the rigidity of constantly going the same way about it. And that comes from a sort of a people collectively exploring together what might be a different way. So, but anyway, I am looking at the time, and I don't want to hold you up too late, but there might be just one more question. Then we could talk for another hour on the basis of that question. But if there is or isn't, if there isn't, I am so grateful that you've been here. And so